There are some political commentators who seem ready to defend Donald Trump no matter what the headlines say, and Jason Rantz is often seen as one of them. In this clip, he's trying to explain away Trump's latest polling numbers. But as the discussion unfolds, that defense comes under some serious pressure. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription helps. Now let's get straight into the clip.
Extraordinary rebuke of President Trump's presidency, his failure to deliver on his promises, and an indictment of his priorities. A new CNN poll finds that just 34% of Americans approve of Trump's job as president, with nearly two-thirds of them disapproving. It's tied for the worst in Trump's career as president, matching his career low, which followed the January 6th insurrection. Half of Americans now strongly disapprove of Trump, a high across his two terms, with a record low of 15% strongly approving. Now, within his own party, Trump's approval rating has also hit a new low, and just 19% of Republicans say they're enthusiastic about the rest of his second term. A record high, 73% of Americans say that Trump hasn't paid enough attention to the country's most important problems, with just 27% saying that he's had the right priorities so far. Now, before we begin and open it up to the table here, I want to invite you at home to join our debate. Head to cnn.com/Abby and weigh in. We'll get to some of your comments as we go through the show tonight. But Jason, this is a really terrible poll for the president, and it's not isolated. A Quinnipiac poll had similar results. The president, the American people are really trying to tell the president in overwhelming numbers that they think that he is focused on all the wrong things. When is he going to listen? Is he going to listen?
I mean, you mentioned the Quinnipiac poll. It's also not great for Democrats. I think the polling overall has been saying pretty much the same thing across the board, not just for the president, that people are generally unhappy. I mean, the Democratic Party is polling at 17% amongst independents with that Quinnipiac, and amongst men, it's at 20%. So I do think that people are complaining.
Democrats have a 48 to 41% advantage on control over the House.
Yeah, but we're going into the House where we expect that the Democrats are going to win.
I'm just saying, in that poll, even in spite of what you're saying, because I get it, right? Like, actually, Democrats are not happy with Democrats, which is probably driving this. The generic ballot favors Democrats right now. But on the president, the simple question, are you paying attention to the things we elected you to pay attention to? When do we get 75% of Americans practically saying anything in this country? They're saying he is not focused on the right things. How is that not a problem?
No, I don't think it's not a problem. It obviously is a problem politically. I think what the president would tell you is that he's focusing on what he believes is best for this country in the long term, despite the fact that it's hurting him right now in the polls. Iran is a perfect example of that. I think everyone in this administration understands the importance of making sure that they don't have access to nuclear weapons and that we are able to completely eradicate the threat that they pose in that region. At the same time, he understands that it's hurting him and the party in the polls. There's no doubt about that. The one bright side, if you want to think of it in that way, is that when that does get figured out, one of the leading reasons behind the polling is where it is the economy and gas prices, and that will return back to normal within a reasonable amount of time. So it's not like something that's going to stay there forever because of a policy that he has gone down.
The president, his party, and his policies on every single major issue they campaigned on are on political life support. Voters will have an opportunity to pull the plug in November.
Well, Democrats are polling exactly the same way.
In that polling, the best way you measure the economy is feelonomics. Economics you can feel. Voters do not trust the president when it comes to feelonomics. That means MAGAnomics has been a failure. That also means the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, largest cut to SNAP, the 25 million Americans who've seen their premiums, copays, and deductibles skyrocket, including 18.2 million Americans in red states. They're showing their passivity in this polling. Donald Trump and Republicans have given the middle finger to middle-class Americans and middle America, and they are going to respond as they have been consistently.
You are ignoring the polling that shows exactly
election.
the same thing when it comes to these issues with Democrats, by and large, across the board. That has been the case.
That may be true about our brand, but November is going to be a binary choice, us versus them. And remember, in elections, I learned this as a Democrat in the last election, it's easier to vote against something than it is to vote for
Well, historically,
People are going to
based
vote
on history,
against
Democrats are going to win.
I also want to
Yeah,
point
I agree.
out that, Jason, you suggested that all the I
Not
don't want to
all.
say all. Most of the president's problems stem from his decision to go into the Iran war, which you support, and the subsequent high gas prices and inflation that followed. But let's look a little deeper at the poll, because it goes even beyond that. On trade, he is underwater 21%. Immigration, underwater 17%. Foreign policy, generally, underwater 28%. So it's not just, I mean, they are unhappy about the Iran war, for sure, Lydia, but it's not just that. It's really literally every agenda item, including immigration, which is supposed to be a strong suit of his. 61% of Americans disapprove.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is certainly a warning letter to Trump. And I think in the last few weeks, we've seen he focused on election integrity, which is polling a little bit better for him. I think he's trying to sort of reposition himself on some of these issues, certainly pushing the Trump accounts, the messaging around that. That's been a huge focus for the White House. But look, I'm not going to be Pollyannish here and say everything's fabulous. I think obviously the midterms is going to be a moment where people have to make a decision. I also am aligned with Jason that I don't think this is some sort of love letter to Democrats. But it is striking to me that one criticism of President Trump has been that he's all about whatever is best for him politically. And I guess for better or for worse, Iran was something that he knew was not going to be popular. A lot of Republicans are sort of regretting that decision that he made, but he's obviously doing that because he sees it as the right thing for him to do.
But he got into that war telling us it would be 4 or 5 weeks. We're now months into this war with 18 dead American soldiers. He has no
polling
plan.
reflects that, yeah.
This isn't about polling. This is about what's really happening. He has no plan to get out. Obviously, no one wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but we were told as Americans twice that we had obliterated their arsenal for a nuclear weapon. Then we were told we obliterated their military to only a few weeks later have soldiers killed by missiles they fired. Americans are, it's not about a poll, it's about the fact that we're in a war led by a man who promised no forever wars, and he has no plan.
So, Dave, to add to the mountain of problems, right? The president has also been very involved in a lot of personal vendettas. Mm-hmm. He's enriched himself greatly in the last 18 months. And 64% of Americans say that when it comes to pursuing his personal business interests while serving as president, Donald Trump has gone too far. There's kind of this sense, when I talk to Republicans on this show and elsewhere, that, oh, it's just all baked in the cake. They know he's a rich guy. But I don't know. I mean, those numbers seem to suggest that Americans don't like it. It leaves a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah, corruption's going to be a big issue in the midterms. And you can attach it to affordability, which he mocks. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, he is putting his name on the Kennedy Center and the airport. I flew up today from DJT International Airport, formerly known as Palm Beach International Airport.
Don't make me sick to my stomach.
It's a controversial thing amongst a lot of people. And so while he's doing that and then making money through business ventures like crypto, people are wondering how they can pay for their gas and their groceries. And so this is a problem because remember, the issues he got elected on were affordability, it was inflation, and it was immigration. And I think of all the numbers you showed, that immigration number should really freak out Republicans. If they're losing on that, then there is no place to go.
Well, let's also get a better understanding of what it even means when we're talking about immigration in this context, because I think if you were to poll specifically about the fact that we actually have a closed border now and people aren't coming across illegally, across the board, Democrat or Republican, would say that's not a good thing.
That's not what Americans see. Americans see the $70 billion slush fund Republicans gave to ICE, and they see people being murdered.
There's not a single American who was polled there that was pointing directly to that. I guarantee you. They're talking about.
Think about the conversations. Think about the conversations we have when it comes to immigration right now in this moment. It's people, it's ICE killing people in cold blood in the streets
Covering
on
their
camera.
faces.
Yeah,
it's little kids being arrested. It's
That did
people
happen. happen.
No,
it did
didn't.
happen.
You're talking, no, you're interpreting certain instances in which people have been killed. There's no doubt. But this idea that they're being murdered in cold blood.
Renee Good and Alex
who
Preddy
almost ran over an ICE agent,
Alex
which we
Preddy.
all saw on
What do
video.
you call the two
not true.
Minnesota incidents?
If you want to point to certain, I'm not suffering from anything.
No, I think you might be
I'm
suffering
looking
with
at
a
the
serious
actual
case of
details.
diabetes if you do not think that Americans do not see people being killed in cold blood by ICE. That's why
Being
American
killed in
people.
cold blood, I think, is rejected by the American people. I think
Well, that's not
overall,
what
people
Poland
look
said.
at some of the
Poland said
cases.
something different.
Is that what was questioned? Was that the question?
Look,
Well, they're talking about immigration as a
What
whole.
was that
ICE
the
is an
question?
element of
Jason,
immigration.
are you suggesting that the American people were happy with how the president handled
No,
the
I'm
Minnesota
suggesting-
enforcement, which did lead to the deaths of 2 American citizens
No.
in the streets?
I'm suggesting that when we
what's the
ask the
point?
question simply on immigration, people who are upset will look specifically at that. But when you point out very specific questions under immigration,
Sure.
you're going to have
But-
different responses.
But either way, on the question of how is the president handling immigration, it seems like people are reacting negatively to that.
Yeah.
The border is closed. The president could have done that and left it at that. He'd probably have a sky-high approval rating on immigration. He chose not to do that, and so his choices around immigration are what is. That's what's being told
people
right
see.
now.
Sure, but his choices were
That is
also
exactly
based on
what people-
campaign promises.
That's exactly
And
what
again,
people are responding
when
to.
you compare this particular issue with where Democrats are polling, they're not doing better than the president. And I think that matters
But this
as
is the
well.
president's signature, one of his signature issues. Right or wrong, it's never been a great issue for Democrats, but this is the president's signature issue. And he didn't just do what was promised to close the border. He never promised to, arrest a
did- he
quota
Yes, he
of
did.
people.
Yes, he did.
Not-
He
He
never
absolutely talked about mass
but I-
I think
arrests.
sometimes
He did.
people.
But here's the real
here's what
question.
you-
Here's the real question for Lydia and Jason. You're looking at these numbers. You acknowledge that there's a problem. At what point do you change course? Or do you just double down on the things that the American people are saying we don't like? I mean, I get your rationalizations, but we're talking elections. There's an election in a few months. Are you just going to say, well, if you don't like it, I promised it. Tough luck, guys.
I mean, to my point earlier, I think he is trying in sort of marginal ways to re-message and highlight some of the things that he has accomplished. But I would also just say, I mean, this is Trump, who, as you noted, had a really bad approval rating about 5 years ago. He staged a comeback. So one thing that we know about Donald Trump is he has come back from a lot worse. So
And
I don't know.
Evan, can I just remind you what my mother used to teach me when I was younger? A hard head will make a soft you-know-what. And the Republicans have been very hard-headed and bullheaded about what the American people are saying. You keep telling me or telling us at this table that compared to the Democrats, voters are going to hold the people in charge accountable, not the people who are fighting to make policy better.
I agree with
the
you.
party in charge. So that means it's not about
And
what
that's-
people
and
think
that's
about
historically
Democrats.
always
It's
what
about
happens.
the
Exactly
people who
the
are
point.
making the policies that are being impacted by
voters
Democrats.
always want to see
I
things
would
happen
argue
more
your
quickly than
point-
it can
Yes,
possibly
your
happen.
point is correct. I don't dispute that. And history
Well, then we
tells
can
us, with
close
the
this segment.
exception of 2 times, that the party in power is going to lose at least one branch of
I don't-
government. But the argument I'm pushing back against is that they don't like these policies, so they must like these policies. They don't like the Democratic policies.
you're
They
right.
simply are responding to the party in power. I agree with that.
Elections are about choices. I agree with you. The Democratic brand is
awful
awesome right now. But at the same time, it's about the candidates. As long as the Democrats can make sure that the DSA doesn't take over the party.
Which they are.
I can argue about that.
Yeah,
I think the Democrats will be fine in November.
We'll press the
All right.
ignore button on that note
We're going to
because
leave
that's not
that one
happening.
there. Next, for us, break.
Let's start with Jason Rantz because, honestly, I don't think his defense of Donald Trump held up very well. Throughout that entire discussion, it felt like every criticism was met with an excuse instead of an answer. At some point, constantly trying to explain away bad polling stops looking like analysis and starts looking like damage control. The reality is that these poll numbers didn't appear out of nowhere. Whether you support Trump or not, a growing number of voters are clearly expressing frustration with the direction of the country and the priorities of the administration. That's the issue that kept coming up during this debate. And I don't think Jason ever really addressed it head-on. Then there's the argument that Trump's foreign policy decisions were simply acts of political sacrifice for the good of the country. You're free to agree or disagree with that, but I'm not convinced. To me, it looks more like an administration following through on promises it made during the campaign, regardless of whether those decisions have become politically costly. That's my interpretation, but I'd genuinely like to hear yours in the comments. Lydia Moynihan also suggested that Trump has come back from difficult political moments before, and that's true. He's surprised people more than once. But every election is different. Past comebacks don't automatically guarantee future victories. Right now, millions of Americans are still worried about everyday issues like the cost of groceries, fuel, housing, healthcare, and paying their monthly bills. When that's what people are focused on, it's no surprise that they're paying close attention to how those in power are governing and whether they're putting the public's concerns first. At the end of the day, elections are decided by voters, not television debates. If enough Americans feel their lives are moving in the wrong direction, they'll make that known at the ballot box. And that's why these polling numbers matter. They're not the final result, but they can be an early warning sign. But those are just my thoughts. Do you think these polls reflect a temporary setback, or are they pointing to a bigger political problem for Trump and Republicans? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel as we continue our march toward 1,000 subscribers, and I'll catch you in the next one.